everyone. Welcome to our board game industry networking panel. I am Tim Blank, president of the Game Makers Guild, and we are very lucky to have three really amazing guests with us today. And they're going to be talking to us about networking. All three of these individuals, they can tell you how awesome they are themselves, but I'm really excited to have them here because they do some really amazing things in the board game industry, and I'm hoping we can learn from them. We have the amazing and awesome Emma Larkins, the fun and exciting Daniel Zayas, and the sweet and adorable Matt Fantastic.
Perfect.
So why don't we start? Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your involvement in the industry?
What did you say? Who did you say first?
Emma, start with you.
All right. I'm up. My name is Emma Larkins. I'm a board game designer, creator of Abandon All Artichokes, and Then We Died, and several other games in progress. I also run the Seattle Tabletop Game Designers Playtest Group. Used to be in person. We really need another name because now we're international and online, but it's still called
Game Makers Guild Seattle is fine, right?
I see what you did there. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like we haven't been talking about this for 3 years, and I haven't been trying to convince you of
Still
this.
Trying to absorb us into your fold.
It's a cool move to make.
It is. Yeah. We're the rebels. We're just out there on the fringes. We meet every Wednesday. We do play testing. Lots of great people, lots of games getting tested there. I also do weekly board game news live streaming with Gen Con TV, and I do a podcast called Ludology.
Just a small podcast, right?
Yeah. You might have heard of it.
Matt?
So I am Matt Fantastic. I am a game designer, I would say, first and foremost. I design games for a lot of different publishers. I have a whole shelf of stuff here. Among other things, I also publish games sort of on a small indie scale, including such hits as And Then We Died. I also own a retail shop and library in New Haven, Elm City Games. I teach game design. I adjuncted a few universities, including the China Academy of Art, which I'm not going to get to go to for way too long. And I do a lot of other consulting stuff in the sort of game adjacent space. I do creative consulting with like Netflix, Yale. I'm doing a big thing with this like tech company building a reward system for this like tech thing. Do like gamified activations for museums, things like that. And I don't know, probably there's some other that I'm sure I'm forgetting. I also co-founded New Haven Game Makers Guild.
I was waiting for that one.
Yeah.
That's where we are on the ladder of the important things, Matt.
I mean, it's definitely the most lucrative of all the things I talked about. But yeah, I don't know. I mostly do all the stuff. There's very little I have not done. So don't ask me about running a warehouse. Or international freight logistics.
Well, we do have someone good to ask about some of that stuff, maybe. Daniel, sorry. Tell us about yourself.
Hi, I'm Daniel. I am the Director of Communications for Long Pack Games, which is a manufacturer based in Shanghai. I also run a diversity first media agency called Tabletop Backer Party, where what we have like 8 content creators currently on board who do shows that promote games that are either seeking funding or about to be released into the market. So yeah, I used to wear many more hats, and I've very been very adamant about removing them. But those are the two main things that I'm doing now.
Yeah, the publisher of the hot upcoming Dia de los Muertos. It's going to be a
exactly. That was
release.
That project is yeah. I would love to make that game. That deserves to be made, but it's yeah.
It'll get there. Gordon and I are back on it.
Good.
Again. trying to.
That's an excellent gaming system. I don't know if like we'll get into it, but like I really do enjoy that game.
Me too, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so in the Game Makers Guild, we have a lot of designers, and they run the whole gamut of experience. We have designers who have been designing for decades and are just putting out, their 25th game right now, all the way down to designers who, are smaller designers, maybe just getting started, don't really know a lot of people in the industry. And so that kind of leads me to my next question right here is, how did you all get involved in this industry? Matt?
Mine's real easy. I was just a huge nerd. I grew up in a D&D family and like just always was a big nerd, and started going to, like public game group stuff and, like local conventions when I was younger. And then you meet somebody and then you start play testing stuff with them. And then all of a sudden you're helping them out with a booth. And then, like we're going to talk about this in much greater detail, but like I absolutely did like the classic, like fan to industry transition,
Yeah.
And that was really it. Just that natural trajectory of doing a lot of stuff, and eventually it's a real thing.
Mine was some of that and also academic stuff. So I was studying digital media entrepreneurship, which is fancy talk for crowdfunding. And at the time I was studying that at a journalism school, and I was also working at a co-working space. This is all going to make sense in a second. I was working at a co-working space, and we were all going to solve the problems of journalism with crowdfunding. And lo and behold, the big thing that actually was happening on the crowdfunding platforms was board games. At that time, while I was working at the co-working space, we started a game night, and it turned into this giant community event that happened every week, where like 50 people every week would show up. And then that exposed me to all of the newest board games that were like the very first things being funded on Kickstarter, right? And then I combined the two things and started writing about it. I started interviewing a bunch of designers who were marketing their games, or publishers who were marketing their games. I started codifying what all these thought leaders were saying is the best way to present a Kickstarter campaign. And like did like a weekly series on that. And then I got picked up by Eagle Griffin, at some point, maybe a year later or something like that, I got picked up by Eagle Griffin as their marketing person. And then a year later I was with Longprint. So that's my very, very short version of that story.
That's fun side note, Zayas. I completely forgot about that. Yeah. Ralph, Ralph?
Yeah.
Ralph is one of the first people that I ever like play tested games with. Because
that's awesome.
Like, he's been around for ever. And he was, coming to game night, and he's like, "Oh, check out like the new Dirk Hen release or whatever," because he was like doing play testing for like Rio Grande and whoever.
I just started blogging, and I met Ralph at like some convention, right? And I was in, it was one of the very first ones that I had actually attended. And then he was like, "Hey, you want to sit down and like play this game with Mike Fitzgerald?" And it happened to be baseball highlights. And I was like,
"Yeah,
nice,
it was like mind-blowing experience."
Yeah, those dudes. Well, Mike moved out to Colorado, as you may know. But they're from like 20 minutes from me. So we went to game groups like for a real long time. I completely forgot you were at Eagle Griffin. That's great, man.
Yeah, for like a year I was with them. Yeah, my first paid gig.
Emma, how about you?
I realized, Daniel, how similar your beginning was to mine, although they quickly diverged. Nice. So I did my research on my background because I always forget my dates. But in 2013, I was also getting into crowdfunding for a startup, trying to figure out that space.
2013, baby, 2013.
Yeah, that was the time when everyone was like, crowdfunding, this is the next big thing.
Yes.
Not journalism, but I was coming at it from the fiction side, which was another thing, all these different avenues coming into crowdfunding. And I got with this company, and they're like, we want to do a crowdfunding campaign. I'm like, I got this science fiction novel, so I ran a campaign. I was working for them. And then as I started doing research on how to do crowdfunding, exactly like you said, a lot of people in that space were video games at the time and some board games. So I started connecting into those communities.
Right.
I kind of did a 90-degree turn at that point and went into video games for a while, although I also was designing my first board game and kind of got into that space because of then boyfriend, now husband, who is designing a game. And there's a really strong scene in New York City for board games and play testing, Gil Hova, all the people out there. So I first got my tastes of that. And then eventually when I moved to Seattle, got even more into that world with working at a board game store and just exploring design to a greater degree.
Even today, Seattle's huge for all of that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It was all Emma. It was all Emma.
It was. I would say there was definitely an upswell for it. When I got here, the Seattle Facebook group for designers had lapsed somewhat. So there was kind of like the first wave of designers.
Got it.
And they grew the group, and then things settled down and no one was really using it. So I kind of did a coup on the Facebook group. I'm like, I'm just going to start running events through here now. And I can't really take credit for it, but everyone, Flat Out Games and Joseph C. Chen with Fantastic Factories,
Yep.
and now Randy Flynn, like just, we all kind of came up at the same time over the last few years, and it's been a really exciting time here.
It's really interesting. That actually brings up like a really, I think, great, important networky thing. And that is that, like, in a lot of ways, you need to kind of chase after stuff. A lot of people, like, there are these waves, right, where people come up and kind of like, we're the class of whatever, right?
Yeah.
It feels like
2013, yeah.
Well, no, in terms of scene, right? So like if you were in Seattle in the mid 90s, it was nuts, right? And everybody was, but that was like early Wizards days. And then and then you had a bunch of people break off from that. And that's when you had, like Mike Seliker and James Ernest and like all Mike Elliott and all those people kind of like splintering off. And that was kind of like a group. And then they kind of like waved up, but then all those people, people tend to find each other, and then you start to drift away from the more public spaces because
exactly.
you don't need it that much anymore, and not in like a rude or bad way. The spaces are constantly like shifting around, so you go from this much larger public space, and you get broken into these smaller, sort of more private spaces, or private public crossover type spaces, like invite strangers sort of things. And it's so important to kind of be continually staying connected to these things, so that you are somebody who's like, oh, hey, like we're all going to be playtesting at Mike's house like next week, like you should come by, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
That is like, it's like those little tiny things of being engaged in the community make like all the difference.
So this panel is about networking. So my next question for you all is, when you think of networking and getting to know people, what do you think of as, how would you define networking, Daniel?
Me, how would I define networking? I think it means being the best version of yourself, and I say that also hoping that everyone is a good person, and most of the time anyway. But like being the best version of yourself and having a laser focus on like what you want to get out of a encounter with something, right? So even not having the context and just saying, I know that I want to publish a game, or I know I want to have a game signed. At least I know that about myself, that when I enter into this conversation, that I will have a hopefully positive experience, because I might share that goal, or might be the person who gives me that opportunity.
May I disagree strenuously?
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
Please.
I think it's the opposite of that to me. It's about creating bridges with people, creating relationships with people, and then those authentic, organic relationships grow into this larger network of people, and it becomes a situation where maybe I can't help you, but I know somebody who can, or vice versa, or it becomes it's this like network. It's a distributed network of knowing people. And I think the best way to get into that is not by approaching any individual relationship as transactional, but approaching every relationship as like, I think you do cool stuff. I'd like to know you. And Zayas, I see you do this all the time. This is the way you operate. Don't out of corporate shill. This is you engage with people, and then those people may or may not be directly like relevant to your business interests, but that like exponentially, they tell two friends and they tell two friends, and like that is getting hooked into it happens in that organic way, and then it spreads from there.
I will agree with you with the lens that my laser focus is to be that connector.
Yeah, it's something I've been thinking about a lot. Is I look at people who I really like and respect, who I think are doing it well, and people who have a difficult time in the space. And I think where I'm at right now is you just really have to genuinely care about people. Mm-hmm. Like, the people I've seen who've kind of done it poorly and had a rough go of it have been the people who have been more transactional, who what's in it for me, trying to push their games and just always bringing it back, not just to themselves, but to the function of, what it is that they're trying to do. And I know it sounds corny, but I always tell people, it's like, just make friends with people in the space. And I know that a lot of us are super awkward and don't necessarily know how to make friends, but honestly, just listening to people, being nice, asking them questions about themselves and showing genuine interest in what they're doing. All of those things are about 90% of what friendship and caring about people is. And like what that does is like establishes that baseline where you care about the person, and then you, especially in these digital times, you check in with someone. It's like, oh, I wonder how their game is going, because I actually care and I think it's a cool thing. And you check in, and they feel good because you care about what they're doing, and then they like you more. And then asking for help, you ask someone for help and they feel good that they can help you. So it really is a lot, not just the things that you're building. You do have to make cool things. I mean, I think that there are definitely some people who come into here and don't ever really make stuff, and you're kind of like, well, so what is it exactly that you do here? But other than that, just putting yourself out there a little bit and being okay with making genuine connections with people.
Yeah, and Emma, you touched upon something which is another question that I had, which you talked a little bit about positioning, and when you look at networking in general, a lot of like business networking advice, they talk about knowing who you are and what your position is in the industry. So can you talk a little bit more about that? Do you think that that's something that's important when you enter a relationship? Should you lead with, this is who I am in the industry, or is it something a little more amorphous in board games?
Yeah, I think you want to know where you are, but also have some confidence. You don't want to undersell yourself. I think that a lot of people come into it and they're like, are you a game designer? Like, well, I'm not really a game designer. I haven't designed games. It's like, do you have a prototype? Have you like sketched stuff down? Then you are a game designer. I think as long as you are actively doing stuff and working on your designs and participating, playtesting other people's designs, then you are just as much in that space as someone who's been doing it for 20 years. I think where it gets a little bit weird is like people have a very good sense of who you are and what you're doing. It's a very transparent industry. We were talking about this a little bit earlier. Everyone's posting this stuff on social media. We're talking about each other's games. We're testing each other's games. So we know if you're doing something or if you're not. I think in all the industries I've seen where someone comes along and they're kind of like trying to give a lot of advice and lift themselves up to a point. It's like, I know what I'm talking about. I'm the expert here, and they haven't really done anything. Then there is to some degree earning your position in this space, and knowing where you're at and just being kind of honest about it. If you're, yeah.
Something I talk a lot about, especially with up and coming designers and newer people to the industry, is context, right? Which is kind of what you're getting at. and that is that, like everybody has opinions, right? And everybody has advice and ideas, and context is just so important when you're taking that in. And it's the same thing when you're meeting people. There's like contexts that like knowing you're a designer is useful. Like, oh, you kind of like, and then that becomes part of a conversation. Knowing, oh, you're in publishing. Oh, you're in, you work in marketing for publishers. Like knowing kind of this vague sense of what people are about is useful. And kind of, I think, being able to present yourself as like, yeah, this is kind of what I do. This is what I'm into. But yeah, I don't think it needs that, like you're saying, I don't think you need to be so pigeonholed, because I think one thing that you'll absolutely see is the vast majority of people that are in the tabletop game industry as a career have worked for a bunch of companies, and B, worn a bunch of different hats.
Yeah.
There are very few people I know that kind of like, this is the path I took and did the path. So it's super normal to be like, I don't know, I'm kind of a whole bunch of stuff. Like I do some of this, I have some experience with this, like that kind of thing is people are comfortable with that sort of nebulous definition, very much. I mean, I guess maybe if you're like trying to get into like accounting or something, you probably should be like a little like more serious about that. But any of the like, even like business to creative, so many publishers are designers or tried to design themselves and did a couple things. So many designers have, especially at this point, self-published something, have some experience there. Like everybody has these like kind of all over the place interests. Most people are just excited about games, so we pay attention to so much.
Yeah, it's important to know that it's an art form, right? Is that all of this is just art, right? So it's very easy for other industries to say like, I'm a musician, I'm an artist, I'm whatever, right? And there, no one questions them on that, or even them themselves. Like it's a yeah, okay, I know how to play an instrument, and this is what I like to do. So this makes me a musician. And there's no, the bar is arguably, maybe like perception may be different, but for me, if I hear someone say, "Oh, I'm a musician," okay, they do this thing. And if someone says, "I'm a game designer," okay, they do this thing. But I think that a lot of people in game design, maybe, especially early on, to what Emma was saying, was that they have second guesses about, am I actually a game designer because I wrote on a napkin? And there's just different levels of professionalism, and obviously, but I do agree with what Emma said about if you make games, then you're a game designer. If you made a game, you're a game designer.
Without making a game, you're kind of a game designer.
Yeah.
Like they said, like you're saying, like it's there are different degrees of professionalism. There's different degrees of being particularly good at something. But like you're doing the thing, right? Like, so if you go in and you meet somebody and you're like, "What do you do?" "I'm a game designer." "Oh, what have you published?" "Nothing yet. I'm still working on it." "Oh, that's cool. You're an up and coming game designer." Like nobody's gonna be like, "Oh, I don't know, man. It sounds like you're like just kind of a game thinker or something." Like, "Oh, I don't know, man. Like that's sorry."
I mean, like award-winning novelist, right? And then you're like, okay, well, that's your level of professionalism, right?
Versus bestseller
novelist, right?
Yeah, well, I think the how of it is really important too, because there are different styles. So if you're a fearlessly indie self-published zine designer, right, as opposed to mass market game/toy designer, as opposed to contract in-house boutique design company designer, right? I think a lot of that can
three of those, Emma.
Which one are you? Yes. One of each.
I guess I'm just hearing that it's such a small industry that it's not uncommon for professionals in the industry to wear all of these different hats. And so you don't necessarily have to position yourself as one thing or another, but also it's a small enough industry that as long as you're just doing things and creating games, you're a part of the industry.
I agree totally with that last part, but I wouldn't necessarily say that it's a function of size. Like I always do take issue. Like I think the industry is huge. Some of the slices of pie that we cut are small, but we did $4.2 billion last year games, right? Like we did okay. But the thing with wearing the different hats, I think, is more when it's a creative/passion industry, right? Like most people that have played in bands, maybe playing in the band is like their main, their main thing. But they, how many people in bands like run little record label imprints? How many people book shows? How many people that do a label also played in a band on the side, right? Like it's it's similar to that, where if you're like so many people in games, especially in the creative side, and especially on the smaller, more passion-driven side, like we're in it because we love games first and foremost. And so we do all the different things because we're excited about all the different things, and we may have excelled or specialized in one of those things, but chances are we have some crossover experience, right? I mean, like even at the sort of like lowest professional level, like you probably play test other people's games. You probably like kind of design your own games. You've probably like maybe you worked a booth or something. You maybe done, and you're like, oh, a lot of people get their start writing about games or interviewing people about games, like doing some media stuff. Like how many game designers are also doing media projects now, right? Like, know, we all wear a lot of hats.
Yeah, we have to, I mean, even from my experience is that, and I think it's still true today, is that the three professional positions, if you count the 2 positions with Longpack, I created the job. I created the position, all 3 times. So there is openings for like, you just want to be here. You're able to offer value. You're able to convince somebody to pay you money to do that valuable task. And a lot of it is, I mean, for me, it was a hustle, but it was not in a bad sense, but it was it was a lot of marketing myself as this thing, but I still have many, many other skills that, to what Matt was saying, is like, I've done all the other things too.
Yeah, and I think it can be tough for some people who want to come into this and be the game designer. They're like, I want to design games. I don't want to market. I don't want to do a Kickstarter. I don't want to do a sell sheet. I don't want to do the pitching. I just want to design the games. And I'm not going to say, I never say anything's impossible, but yeah, exactly, Daniel. You have to be ready to do the different pieces. You're going to go farther faster.
I don't know that I'd even say that. I'd say that it's knowing yourself is the key there. Right? I think it's that if you're trying to fit yourself into that hustle, like you're not going to succeed. But maybe you do just want to do this thing. Well, great. Like there are agents. There's other avenues for you to take where there's sacrifices that we made. Everything. There's so many things are a trade-off. But like you can kind of carve your own path. It's just you need to be aware that that's the path you're trying to carve, right?
Yeah.
Like if all you want to do is design, great, that's it. But like that's the slice that you're going to go down, right? And so many people struggle with that when they try to broaden it, right? They're like, I just want to design, but I feel like I have to do all this other stuff too. And that's where you really start to like get lost a little bit.
I don't think you can narrow it down until you've like met enough people and know what is happening in the industry you want to be in, right?
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that a lot of people in the industry, they kind of go through these cycles of like, I'm a designer. No, I'm everything. No, I'm just a designer. No, I'm everything again. And I think that's completely normal. And I think other people in the industry understand that. So, so how would you all say you went about making your first networking connections? And looking back at it now, what would you have done differently? So Matt, you said that you kind of started in a more kind of traditional.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was, I don't really know that I'd do much differently. Maybe I would have jumped into being more active earlier, I guess, like volunteering at booths and which I will put an asterisk in, like, my very brief advice is don't volunteer at booths anymore. Like get paid, because that is what the industry is trending towards.
Yeah.
And like 15 to 20-year-old experiences are of an industry that was not ideal. And, like value your time and effort. And, there may be reasons to not get paid, but generally like that's more the norm now. So when I say volunteering, it's not exactly what I mean necessarily. Or there's nonprofits and things you can do volunteer for. It's great. It's complicated. But anyway, I wish that I maybe had started like jumping into stuff earlier. Like when I got into like sort of play testing and volunteering, and I was organizing public game nights and started running this big meetup group with a few thousand people that we built up, and that was, like part of that transition in. And I wish that I had maybe accelerated that a little earlier, thought like, well, why not Matt, right? Like, it was like, oh, I can't work a booth for somebody? Like, what? And it's like, no, like nobody cares. Like, it's not in a bad way, just like nobody like, yeah, go work the booth, man. Like, you don't have to be like a special secret, whatever, like if you talk to somebody and they're like, yeah, we're going to do this convention, like just ask, like, hey, do you need help at the booth? Like, oh, hey, like local publisher, like, can I email you? Do you guys do you play test stuff? Like, can I come play test some of your stuff? Some of the earliest people I met, I mean, I lucked out in that I came up with Kurt Covert, who does Smirk and Dagger, yep, and designs for some other people as well. So I play tested his second game. I met him when he was just he was very, very early in his career, but he was like multiple steps way above me. And I thought it was so cool that I met oh my God, this guy designs and publishes games. Like, whoa. And then I also
his Candyland games. Yeah. I remember back when that was just what he had. Yeah. His Candyland games.
Yeah. Run for Your Life Candyman. And then there's the Candyland shooter one. That actually, I think the shoots like guns and ladders, I believe or shooting ladders. That's it.
Yeah. Shooting ladders.
I think the first game that my name is actually in the rule book for.
Nice.
And that was really cool. And some of the Cutthroat Cavern stuff. But then Zev also happened to be, relatively close. And so I met Zev early on. And so I was like playtesting with Zev, and I helped Zev run a booth. And then I started running booths for Zev. And, but that was just like oh, hey, like this guy happens to be local. Like, let me, like, he kind of came down to one of the public nights to, do some playtesting and stuff. And it was, I wish that I chased after him earlier, because once I met him, it was like, oh, like you're super chill and like would happily have me come to your house and playtest games. Like that would be great for you. So, so that's my big takeaway is ask earlier, talk to people, don't be cutthroat about it, but people are just normal, regular people making stuff. And if you show an interest, like, do it. Not everybody's going to work out, but like get in there.
Yeah. I got two things. The first one, and this was even before I was doing games, I was doing online writing and running a blog, talking to authors, and you ask people higher steps up the ladder than you to do like a talk or a blog post or an interview. You'd be amazed how much people just love talking about themselves. So even nowadays on Twitter, you reach out to someone like, oh, they would never talk to me. It's like, hey, I want to do an interview with you. I've got 5 people on my YouTube channel or whatever. Like most people just who've come up in their craft, they just love talking about what they're doing and are super excited to do it with just about anyone. So that's a great way to make a lot of those initial connections. And because you've featured them and you've had a conversation with them, like the people I talk to on Ludology, I have a connection to them now. So that's a great way when you're first starting out to connect. The other thing I have is I love the amoeba theory of networking. And that's just being in the place wherever the people are. And for me, I used to be super awkward and shy. So just stand near the snack table or whatever, meet one person, like just look like, hey, I like your shoes or something, make a tenuous connection with one other person. And then in a not totally awkward way, kind of like hang out with them. And because these spaces are so tightly connected, chances are they will start a conversation with a group of people and you'll be chatting. And then that group will break up and connect with another group. And all of a sudden you'll just be meeting all of these other people. So if you can just form a connection with one person, you don't have to meet everyone. You just like find the connector person who's kind of going to take you around, take you under their wing. The one change I would make would be exactly as Matt said, to value my contributions and my time more earlier on, because there was definitely a lot of volunteering for a booth, but I also already had a ticket to the show and I also paid for my own hotel room. So it was really just like a lot of times where I was just like, wow, I want to help this person out. So I would help them do demos and stuff and put in a lot of effort for not necessarily get a return on that. So definitely sometimes you got to do things where you might not get paid a ton of money or whatever, but it is important. The sooner you start valuing yourself and the stuff that you are providing for the industry, the better you're going to be at, and what Daniel was saying too, like finding your path, finding what is meaningful for you and getting that right balance of the energy you're giving and what you're getting in return.
Well, if you want to volunteer, there's lots of great opportunities, right? Like you can volunteer for nonprofits, you can volunteer to like help do Game Makers Guild stuff, get involved, volunteer at BFIG, right? Like, there's a lot of volunteer opportunities where it doesn't have that gross hyper capitalist like labor quasi exploitative labor practice thing where like, hey, you're making money. Like there's plenty of people that are not making any money and their goal is not to make money that you can help out, that you can, do stuff with, organize some extra life stuff. Like there's plenty of avenues. Don't feel like you can only go into these paid avenues, but just, think about the avenues that you're taking. And if you want to do stuff for free, like there are great organizations that you can involve yourself with.
My path was, I went straight to the top when I went to look at who was being successful on Kickstarter. Seriously, this is what happened. Like I started blogging, and I know I glossed over the fact that, I started like trying to craft a rubric of best practices, codifying what other people were saying. But in order to do that well, like I had to talk to.
Yeah.
What's that?
Board Game Badger, was that it?
It was Meeple Mechanic before.
Meeple Mechanic. The first iteration was Meeple Mechanic.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was my first blog. But like even today, the people who knew me back then are like, hey, like that was a catalyst of here. Like people took for granted now. Well, first of all, like even the fact that when I was joining the industry, it was very much like Kickstarter brought me in versus like being a fan of board games bringing you in like a normal trajectory. That was a weird thing. I think nowadays maybe obviously more common that people are discovering board games through crowdfunding. But yeah, when I was starting in, I attempted to make a rubric, but like there were very, very basic things that we take for granted now, like having a how to play video in your campaign, right? Like having a rule book, all of these like these itemized things that like are now checklists for publishers. It was not that way. Even the early $1 million campaigns that you saw, they would not make that money today. And so I went to those people who were making that amount of money, told them what I was trying to do from an academic standpoint, and then they really set the course for me to like find more people who were thought leaders within the industry.
Yeah. Sound like some really good like corporate like phrases, Zayas.
Yeah, sorry, I'm the corporate shell in this conversation, which is very strange. It's very, very strange for me.
And I'm over here trying so hard to not just curse. Like, that's my like buzzwording it up like.
This is a very I'm not normally that person. I'm trying to I don't know.
Well, I mean, if I'm on the thing, like no matter what, you're going to be like the corporate toad compared to like,
it's
spectrum. You have a spectrum.
For me to be that person is very not me.
It's got like a Felix and Oscar thing going on.
Really shifted on this particular panel.
Well,
yeah, this is where I got my start right here.
Game Makers Guild panel. Yeah.
Exactly.
So I'm hearing you all talk, about conventions and about being in the right space. Daniel, maybe not so much. But I do know that you do have a big presence when you go to board game conventions, and you're always taking meetings with people, grabbing lunch with everyone. Conventions aren't happening right now. And then there's also times between conventions. So when you're not physically there with people, what kind of things are you doing in order to stay connected to them?
Today, what I'm doing is I'm asking my friends, who am I not talking to who I should be? That's my recruitment tool, is the existing network I have. You could do that even with one connection that you have. I literally ask that question, who should I be talking to who I'm not talking to? Can you make an introduction? That is the exact phrase that I would use.
Cool.
Damn, Zayas, that's like some cold ass business.
That's what I do. That's what I've been. That's
real smart. I want to do that, man. That's so good. Like I should do that. Like, I'm just over here like, I don't know. I don't talk to anybody anymore.
You talk to people. You talk to me.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think now is very different than between conventions in normal times. But I still think there's very much opportunity. I don't think that people should be stressed. In some ways, it's a lot better than it was because a lot of people couldn't go to conventions. In the Discord playtest group that I run, so many people are so grateful to have this space, and so many people have come into game design much more fully because they didn't have a local group, and now they have this Discord group, and it's so powerful to have that. So, and there's a bunch of us, like there's our group, there's Gil's group, there's groups every day of the week, groups, international places, Discords that you can go to, even just be in the Discord. Even if you don't have the game yet, you can play test other people's games, get your game play tested if you do have a prototype, and just start to be around people. One of the great things our group does is we make sure people have their actual names and their pronouns in there. So it makes it a little easier to connect with people on other platforms. You see this person on Twitter, you see them on Facebook, so you know who this person is, and you can connect in other ways. So I think the Discords in particular and the groups, and a lot of these are public or semi-public, ours, BGG, we have links to our groups, so they're not too hard to get into them. The other thing I would say is kind of along the lines of what Daniel was saying is forging stronger connections with the people that you have. So one of the things I've been doing and I want to do more of is just reaching out to people. And it's so good, not even just from a game design standpoint, is all of these people like you all. I've met you all, I've had amazing conversations. It's so great to be having this chat with you. And just this chat is one instance of us strengthening our connections. And then in different channels, Facebook Messenger, you know, it doesn't have to be complex. Just like, hey, what's up? What are you up to? You don't have to be best friends with everybody in the industry, but all those people you would see at conventions, you know, you're thinking like, man, I haven't seen so-and-so in so long. I wonder what they're up to, you know, just
I'm just here for the industry drama. The industry drama. That's what I stick around for.
I mean, that is one of the things that we all talk about behind the scenes.
All I still get, like, because I'm the worst at talking to people and keeping up, like, remotely. Like, I'm not a remote friend. I'm so bad at it. I'm also used to doing 20 plus shows a year. So like, you know, like Zayas, you know, like we see my best friends are people that I see every weekend or every other weekend. And like, now they're gone. And like, it's not the same for me, at all.
Emma, I apologize, by the way, I cut you off with a stupid joke. So.
Oh yeah. I just like, and it's, again, I know not everyone is like this, but I feel a lot of us in this industry are potentially more introverted, don't have a lot of the reason we play board games and design board games is because we don't want to go to a bar and just hang out, although some of us do that as well. So just working up the courage for that on a Twitter DM, or even just like a Twitter, replying to someone's comment on Twitter, just being a little more active. You don't have to go crazy with messaging a million people, just one person. Just be like, hey, you know, I like the thing you posted. Share something that someone is working on, you know, back their Patreon or their Kickstarter. There's a lot of little touches you can do to just kind of strengthen the relationships in a time where we don't have those same in-person experiences.
I'll say something about that too, because one thing that I get to do every year with running Boston Fig is I get to reach out to all of these industry professionals, and you know, I get a lot of them who will volunteer their time to review some of our videos, and I always just sit back during that time and I'll be like, it's just really good to catch up with everyone, you know, and it usually happens around a time when there aren't a lot of conventions, you know, like February, March, and it's great. And, you know, every year I tell myself I need to do this more when I'm not asking them to review videos, but then, you know, life. But yeah, so that really resonates with me, Emma.
Can I go on like a tangent here briefly?
Sure.
About in the non-COVID times, I do want to hit on it because we're not going to talk about it too much probably, but in the non-COVID times, I do want to incredibly it wouldn't be an overemphasis to say that going to conventions is the single best thing you can do. Like it is. I mean, if you do it and you go meet people and talk to people, you know, if you go to a convention and you can do it totally wrong. But if you go to a convention, like the signal to noise ratio is just continuing to get higher and higher in every facet of the industry, and everything going remote now has made it just skyrocketing, right? So for me, you know, perfect example is the first time I went to Essen to pitch, And like in the US, like, I don't know, like I knew like 5 people and like I could sort of pitch them, right? I went to Essen and I emailed everybody, hey, I'm like coming over from, the US, like I'm looking for pitch meetings. And man, everybody wanted to talk to you, right? Like the biggest people, because the idea that I was an American that was committed enough or serious enough to make that effort to go to Essen to go pitch these companies was just like an immediate, like that was a huge barrier that was now cleared. And so any opportunities you have to try to clear those barriers, like, and this isn't necessarily the optimal situation. Like I'm not necessarily advocating that this is a good way for the world to be, but the unfortunate reality is that situation is really just, it is the single best thing you can do. So if you have an interest in doing that, think about your priorities and think about, what you want to prioritize in that way, right? Maybe you forgo something else that you were excited about and typically do so that you can go to this convention because your priority has shifted to be like, I really want to make a go of this. I really want to make this game get published. I want to, whatever. Like you may have to adjust priorities in a way that save up all your money. Don't eat out for a year so that you can go to Essen, right? And like that kind of stuff can be, I don't mean to sound like it's easy because it's certainly not the financial level at which it's very difficult. But like even if it's a local convention, even if it's whatever it is, like this showing the effort is really like a huge hump. So any opportunity that you can get to show effort, like it's the difference between a cold email and like walking up to somebody at a booth and saying like, hey, I love the games that you make. Like I'm an up and coming designer. Do you have any time at this show to maybe take a look at some stuff? And even the worst case in those situations, you just get kind of turned down. And most cases, people will be happy to either follow up with you later or talk to you, but you're never going to get that when you're one of 1,000 people that emailed this person a sell sheet, right? Like, so I don't want to accidentally gloss over that, like the physical space is just light years ahead of whatever we're doing remotely.
And it doesn't have to be Essen too. I mean, like.
Oh yeah, no. That was an extreme example, maybe.
Yeah. Well, it's more and more so. I mean, obviously not this year, but before that, there's conventions just every single week, and they're everywhere. Like around here in the Pacific Northwest, in like Seattle, and then in Tacoma, and in Vancouver, and even some of those very small, like 200-person, 500-person conventions. Again, here in Seattle. Right? Like there's so many designers here. So even the Emerald City Comic-Con or it's just not small, but the game presence is a little smaller. OrcaCon. Yeah, exactly. Like we're all there. Like all these people have raised hundreds of thousands of dollars on Kickstarter. We're there. And, the publisher's game right might not be there, but we know those people, right? That's 1 degree of separation. So you just make the connections to the smaller local designers and they're connected to the other people. You'd also be surprised, like the Comic-Cons, the more video, like PAX West, like a lot of these tangential conventions, anime cons are starting to get more board game presence. So some of these connections, you can go to a convention that is local, that's not like 100% board games. And those can even be the better ways to connect to people because not as many people are there for the board game aspect. So board game people can be more accessible.
We're talking directly to a game design group that could carpool. We talked before the show, joking about the caravan of Canadians that come pouring down into Northeast conventions every year.
Yeah, well, you guys can walk to PAX East, right? Like, don't like that's. I forgot also that this is if you're not going to PAX East, like you are really blowing it. Like just you're blowing it.
Yeah. And for the PAXs, it's great. There's like so many indies there, and having done the video game stuff, not even board games, all of the indie mega booth people, I guess indie mega booths maybe not a thing anymore. I forget. It might have fallen apart.
It got complicated. But they were doing tabletop too, so there's the indie tabletop mega booth anyway.
Right. So it doesn't have to be that. Like there's just thousands of small, like 1 and 2 person companies showcasing at PAX East, and most of them you'll get 2 or 3 tickets, and they will be a single person showing the game. And if you can cover for that person, you'll get a ticket, like an exhibitor ticket there. Like most of the people there, I would say, have extra tickets and not enough people to cover their booths. So if you have transport there and it's a local thing and you can get the ticket covered, then easy peasy.
Anybody
Pay $15 for a hot dog.
I'm gonna actually throw this one out there, that anybody in Game Makers Guild that wants to email me about wanting to work for companies at shows, I can never guarantee any placement, but I have, like especially with students and things like that, like I've placed hundreds of people at booths over the years. And like I absolutely help people out with that stuff, so if you're like, hey, I'm going to be at this show, give me a couple months lead time and say, hey, like, do you have anybody? And I can add you onto the list of people that I hit up for volunteering opportunities or booth work opportunities, or things like that.
Yeah,
that's another benefit of being in Game Makers.
Well, I mean, I was going to say, as someone who runs game design groups, the importance of having people in a group like this, because I get publishers who come to me every year for PAX East to say, we need more people for our booths. We'll cover their ticket, especially at PAX East, because we're local. They'll say, we need more people. We'll cover a ticket. We'll buy them dinner one night too. And all they have to do is show up and do 12 hours over the course of the 4 days. And then you get the other 20 something hours of the convention to go around and have fun and meet other people too. But it's, getting involved in some kind of game design group. So if you're not from around Boston and you're watching this, Cardboard Edison has a really great directory of local game design groups. So see what's in your area and try to get involved. And then if not, we've got those Discord groups that Emma was talking about.
If there isn't, start your own.
Oh,
yeah.
You need one other person to start a game design group.
And I would want to say real cool, like we talked earlier, it's weird. We're kind of playing both sides, like volunteer for things, don't volunteer, like what is your time? I mean, just try different things. If your goal is to connect with these publishers, it can be a great way. And honestly, like making a good game design is only a small part about being picked up by a publisher. Showing that you are a competent and reliable person to work with, it turns out, is a big part of being picked up as a game designer, because publishers want to work with someone who they can trust. And if you're there bright and early in the morning and you're doing things and you're showing games and you're knowledgeable and you make a good impression, like everyone will see that, right? And it's just going to make it so much easier for you to spread your wings.
Yeah, to what Emma was saying was like there are a lot of high level conversations happening even today of paying people for their time, not abusing the workforce, not taking advantage of these types of situations, legality involved with that, right? I don't think that is necessarily your problem. Like, you should value your time and then make those decisions on a personal level. But know that like these conversations are happening where like the effort is to take care of the people coming in. But yeah, you have to make your own decision for like what is your time worth. And I don't know, like if you said, hey, like at the very beginning, like, hey, like go work at the largest companies, or intern at the largest companies, especially me as a student, like getting credit for it. You won't get paid, but you do 6 months at Hasbro or something and you'll learn this much stuff, right?
I think part of it is recognizing that you're being exploited and being okay with it, right? So like it sounds silly, but like the thing is that there are situations where, like getting exploited, you're going to get something out of it. You're getting exploited, but like you're still like, well, you know what? Like I'm going to hustle it. I'm going to make it work. I'm going to do whatever. But the key to me is really just recognizing that this is not that you may be getting exploited if you are, right? And that this is like this company's doing a bad, like they're not treating you well, and they are intentionally or unintentionally hostile to, labor, and just be aware of that and contextualize that experience. And if you are still like, you know what, like, I mean, for me, like, man, I am so thankful for the times that Wizards of the Coast, like, put me up in a hotel with 5 other people, and it was the way that I was able to make something work. So I worked 45 hours in like 3 days, but man, I got to go to this show for the first time. I got to, whatever. But it's just being aware that like that's not the norm, I think is a big shift that's going on in the industry, is that the people who are doing that are now being looked at as kind of exploiting labor. People are, whatever excuses we may or may not want to make for the past, people are now aware of it. People are now being made to understand that like, oh, that is kind of like, I am kind of doing you dirty. I'm making a bunch of money at this convention and I'm going to like, pay you in a couple games? Like that seems kind of neat, right? But if you're aware of that, you can say like, well, you know what? Like nobody that had money was going to hire me. And so like, these guys are just exploiting the hell out of me, but also like, I'm gonna get it though. Like,
if that's you're in, and that's like acknowledge it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is important to recognize the inherent privilege there, and not everybody has the circumstances in which they have the privilege to hustle and take advantage of these circumstances, which is why I've been glad seeing things, scholarships and things that make it possible for people who don't have those opportunities for whatever reason to be able to take advantage.
Yeah.
All right. So my last question for each of you before we start taking questions from our audience is, what would you say is the one or maybe 2 nuggets of advice that you would give to individuals who are wanting to do more, get to know more people, increase their networking in the industry? Like your biggest
the most important skills you can develop are your soft skills. Like making good games is just nothing. Who cares? Who cares? There are so many game designers that are just as good as you. There's so many game designers out there that are making products that are just as, if not more exciting. And I don't beat yourself up, just as exciting, but like the likelihood that you made the next D&D is very low. And the difference between your great game getting picked up and one of the hundreds of other great games that are getting shopped around right now is absolutely your ability to connect with those people. And there are a lot of ways. You don't necessarily need to be a big loudmouth idiot like me. You can have your own vibe. Like it's not necessarily a specific vibe, but be like, you were saying, be somebody who's responsible. Be somebody who shows up, who works hard, who doesn't, can talk to somebody. You don't necessarily need to be like super charming, whatever, but like be able to have a real conversation, treat people respectfully, like some of these like things that are, in some ways very basic, but for some people are an effort. Like that's what you need to work on. If that is a deficiency, that's what sells games. That's what closes deals. That's what gets you pitch meetings. That's especially what gets you invited back to pitch meetings, right? Be okay taking no. You show up to a pitch meeting. This is my passion thing. We're 2 minutes in and you say, nah, I'm good. Be like, thank you so much for your time. Like, I really appreciate it. Is it cool if I talk to you again? Right? Like, that's the move. Like, it's never push, right? And it's unbelievable how many people don't emphasize this, right? Enough. Like your game needs to be great, like done. Like your game needs to be great across the board. But that's a given, right? You need to develop your ability to connect with people, because that is 100% what gets your game done. Is people wanting to work with you, people thinking you're trustworthy to work with. Like I printed projects with Daniel, and I push people that way constantly, because I know that if I'm mad, I can say like, Zayas, man, what the hell? And at the very least,
I've fielded many phone calls from you on that.
Yeah. But the thing is, like I'm happy to deal with whatever it is, because I know that there's somebody there that I've made a connection with, right? I know that there's somebody there that I've seen in action, and that is what closes the deal, right? And it's true with everything. When you think about who you go to get your haircut from, who you choose, the shops you choose to go to, whatever, it's all of these soft things, right? It's these subtle cues, it's these side things adjacent to what the actual thing is, right? You go to probably the absolute best like hairstylist or barber in the region, you probably don't. Like you probably go to somebody that you're like, oh, I mean, I don't know, they're pretty cool. I like what they're about. Like, there's all these other reasons than the core skill, right? And so, developing your core skills is great, and you need to do that too. But soft skills, man, that's it. That's my rant. Sorry.
Was that a segue into your hair situation? Because I know we haven't brought that up.
My de-aging. Yeah.
I can't.
Everybody says I'm looking young.
I love it personally.
Yeah.
Whatever, Zayas, you look like you're working out like a madman.
Yeah.
5 days a week now. I'm
ripped.
Transform.
There you go.
Nice.
All the splats.
Right, yeah, Orange Theory. What my advice is maybe harkening back to the beginning of this is like to be open to not being the game designer, right? Be open to whatever opportunity floats your way, and yeah, maybe you're still pitching, maybe you're still even self-publishing, right? But you can easily wear the other hat, doing something else within gaming and still have a very, very fulfilling career. That's probably my best advice.
We were talking about that before the call, about how everyone in the industry is more than that, and how that was kind of how I got into the industry as a publisher, and then said, no, that's not for me, and how useful that is in how I speak with publishers, because I know that a little bit about that side of the industry.
Sure. Yeah, carrying a product from cradle to grave. I mean, I've done it now, and I don't want to do it anymore. So I'm going to do other things that are more fulfilling to me. This is a personal thing.
Yeah, I do actually have two. I was thinking about one, and I thought about another one. So first up is striking the balance between pushing yourself and listening to yourself. So we talked about a lot of things about being extroverted, about being introverted. I think just finding a way for your brand or yourself or whatever it is that does make you comfortable. Experiment with some things. Maybe you're not great at free-form conversation, but you really love learning and teaching games, and that can be your thing. Go to conventions and do the teach part of it and rely less on just having open-ended conversation with people. Maybe you just love art, taking pictures or sketching or something. Maybe you like knitting koozies, and that's how you promote yourself, and that's what you get known for. I think if like just posting selfies or whatever is not your thing, then you don't have to do that, right? Like that, you don't have to do any of this. But at the same point, like don't get so in your comfort zone that you do nothing. Like you have to play around with all of these things and find one of them that does work for you.
Everyone needs a gimmick. Everyone needs a gimmick.
So that was my second one. Yes, please have a gimmick. Yeah, you see the hair, right? Like this has came up with me through my career and has been one of the defining factors, and I'm sure contributes no small part to my success. And there are a lot of generic people out there. I'm not going to specify the categories of that, but there's a lot of people who don't have a memorable thing, and if you just have a hat or something, honestly, can help you to get recognized in the space.
Most people I've kind of grown out of wearing dresses all the time, and I would do it at conventions, but I would do it at home, whatever. I was a big princess. I just liked wearing princess dresses out to like parties and going out and stuff, and oh my god, it did. You became memorable instantly. Everybody remembered when they saw me at that party, right? Everybody remembered that they talked to me briefly at this thing. They saw me swing by the booth, and being around. That's the thing too. Is like once you're around enough, you become part of the scenery, and people just assume you're like there, and it's like whatever, like oh yeah, like I don't know, like there's people that I absolutely just noticed around, and then you just start talking to at like you see them at the stuff, right? I mean. For me, one of my favorite stories I just told was how I used to sneak into parties like ruthlessly, and still do if I need to. But like I was literally like climbing the fence in the back of like the French party, which is like the Asmodee Yellow, whatever in Essen.
Yep.
This is like maybe like 7 or 8 years ago. And there were a few of us who were like, we tried to get in, and they were like, "No, man, like what? Like who are you idiots?" And then.
I've done that exact thing.
Yeah,
I chickened out. I didn't go through with it.
And it was just, and then
don't hurt yourselves climbing fence.
We're in there, And then it was like, people are like, oh yeah, like I've seen you. Like, what do you do again? And it's like, oh, like I do nothing. I mean, man, there's editing though, right? I do so good, so good. I do. I don't know, man. Like whatever. But like you've seen me around, and now you think I'm like worth talking to, and like you're part of the scene. You just become part of it. Just be there. Be there.
Yep.
Yeah. Sometimes at this point with the friends I've made is I will tag them in like our 1 year anniversary of being Facebook friends, and they're like flabbergasted. They're like what? Like we've known each other obviously a lot longer than that. Like, no, it's been a year. It's been about a year. And then just being that person who's just always there, it matters. And it gives us like time, perception that is maybe not accurate, but is it's helpful.
Yeah.
Con scene is a very bizarre life.
So what questions do you have for people who are in our audience? What questions do you have for our three panelists here? If you're going to ask a question, obviously make sure to unmute, but feel free to jump on camera too.
You can also put it in chat. Right?
Yeah, you can put it in chat too, and
I'm
happy to read that. I mean, I have one that's, I guess, kind of personal. A lot of people are surprised to realize that I'm an introvert. And that I'm a pretty shy person. So what kind of things would you say to individuals who are needing to overcome that? And Emma, I know you've talked about it a little. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's like high school. I would literally like sit on the stairs in high school and people would just like walk past me. I was just like 100% invisible. And just like I literally never learned the skills how to talk to people growing up. And at a certain point, I'm just like, this is what I want to do. Like, I want to do stuff. I want to create stuff. I want to make stuff. And that will only happen if I go to these, go to the local meetups, go to the conventions. So yeah, for a while, I would just show up and be super awkward. And it was really tough and not knowing how to talk to people. And I have some recordings, just very awkward talks and speeches that I gave where I knew nothing. Hopefully I'm better now. But you got to just do it, just kind of at a certain point. And like the things I mentioned, like you can find ways that are more comfortable for you. You don't always have to dive right in and just like, I'm going to make a panel with 6 people who I don't really know and talk in front of 100 people. You don't have to go that head first into it. But at a certain point, you do have to put yourself out there, whether it's even just going into a Discord group, going to a local playtest group, showing up. Like you got to get over the boundary just to show up. And after that, you can mostly figure your way out from there.
Well, I'm glad we have Emma here because I was voted most outgoing in my high school class.
Really?
Yeah. I'm like, I don't know, man. Like that seems like probably tough, I guess, if that's your vibe.
All right, Steve, you had a question. First off, how's dinner going for you?
I see a super quick one in the chat that I'll just, Lauren is asking, is Essen bilingual? And the answer is like supremely.
Yeah.
Like it is actually more, like you'll run into obviously a lot of Germans, but English is spoken just as, if not more, because Essen is so international that there are a lot of people that are not Germans there, and this kind of shared language, because a lot of bad reasons, English is like everybody that speaks a second language generally speaks English. And so Essen is like super cool. The only things I know how to do are order beers and say like, I'm sorry, in German. And so, so super duper easy.
All right, Steve, you're up.
Awesome.
How was dinner?
How was dinner?
All this stuff's been really helpful. Emma, I met you actually at PAX East because I volunteered in the Game Right booth.
Yeah.
So I got to play your game and meet you and hang out. We actually played, I think, Phil's game or something like that, and it was really a lot of fun. But it really, to me, that boils down to just play games, right? I joined a game night not to design games, just to play games. Turns out I'm playing with the guy who invented Anomia. I had no idea, right? But he ran this thing, and before you know it, I got to be friends with him, right? And at the conventions, obviously, you're going to meet a larger number of people. But there was something that I'm trying to remember. I think, Daniel, you might have mentioned it, about things like Facebook, right? If you don't have the means or the ability to be, not necessarily financially, I'm just let's say I had kids and I just couldn't get 2 packs because that's a 2 or 3 day commitment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Things like Facebook offer, I mean, not Facebook, what were we just talking about? Kickstarter offers an interesting opportunity too. Very often, a lot of the board game designers will offer various levels of donations, and one of them might get you 15 minutes with the designer. That's how I met Mike Selinker, for instance, right? He had a Maze of Games thing. I'm a Maze guy. And so I was able to just have 15 quiet minutes with him one-on-one in a room rather than, so for somebody who's introverted, that's a nice welcoming opportunity. He was just as easy and forthcoming about asking questions as I was, right? So sometimes opportunities like that cost me an extra $10. I got his great thing, and for an extra $10, I got 15 minutes with this hotshot guy. So never underestimate, the opportunities that you get by just playing games.
I mean, I will tell you very aggressively that like there's not a single person in the industry that does not appreciate you coming in and being like, hey man, I love this thing that you make. Like,
right.
Nobody's going to be like, I don't know, man, like get bent. Like, no, nobody's like, at worst, they'll be like, oh, thank you so much. Like, really, like they'll be busy.
This is one of my favorite things.
Like, there's nothing to lose. Like, it's not going to go badly, right? Like, the worst thing that will happen is they're otherwise occupied and can't really pay attention to you. But like, nobody, like, that's just wonderful. People love that. And Mike especially.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
I didn't want to say that.
Yeah. You'd be surprised. Some people are awkward too. Like you meet a designer and you're like, oh my gosh, I love your game. They're like, thank you. Like it's like super popular people. Like, or you're like, can I take a selfie with you? Like, I gotta go. So the worst thing I think that can happen is the interaction is like they just turn out to be shy and awkward about it. But that's fine. It's no big deal.
My Mike Selinker story is even like one of my earliest interviews was of him. This is very, very similar to what Steve was saying about like he was promoting a Kickstarter campaign. I interviewed him. I mentioned to him before the interview. I was like, oh yeah, like at the time, like I hadn't been exposed to a ton of games. I've been exposed to enough, and like for me at that time, very early on, Smash Up was like my game. I was like, this is the calling. I love this. This weight class of games, and it's very casual, and I can interact with people and have fun with Take That. And then just out of nowhere, I do the interview. I'm supposed to do the interview with Mike, and for the video, he brings in Paul Peterson for the interview, and like I interview both of them very, very early on, and I'm like starstruck. And it was a very, very fun thing. And now that was like the beginning of now I'm friends with both of them. But like you don't know what's going to lead to what, right? And so just being open to those opportunities and ridiculous situations is probably a good first step.
We do have a question.
I have a really good Mike Selinker story that I'll tell when we're not recording anymore. It's not rude towards him in any way. It involves bad words.
I see. Uh-huh.
Okay. Yeah.
We have a question in the chat from John, who is asking about how do you connect with people but not be annoying. So he says that he had a game that he presented to a pretty large publisher. They said they were interested and asked them to email him when he did some development work on it. So he did some work on it, and he thinks it's pretty neat. He said he sent 3 emails in the past 2 months, and he's worried about being a nag. So how would you recommend he navigate that?
Yeah, so I answered him privately briefly already because I know who it is, and I gave like some little insider advice. So that's my first tip is ask people that you know well enough, or even through GMG, because you might get some scoops on what's going on with the company, because some of us are all very nosy busybodies about everybody's stuff. Like, between me, Zayas, and Ross, I feel like we know literally everyone's business.
That's a really good
that somebody may have a personal insight into that. So don't be shy about asking someone directly, or if you're feeling comfortable, whatever. If you know somebody, like you have a Tim, for example. But in general, I would say that every 4-ish weeks is a good standard. Hey, like nobody's you want to do it. Here's the problem. This is the real psychological thing is I would worry less about being a nag, like do it professionally and politely, What you want to worry about is actually creating a negative perception around yourself and the experience, even if you're the one being totally reasonable. Because now I see this email and I'm like, oh, I need to respond to this. Oh my God. Like, I'm so mad at myself for not taking care of this. And now it becomes this like kind of negative thing. So when you're following up, just make sure that you're doing it in a really positive way, in a really like, hey, like, I understand what's going on. I'm just, I just want some clarity, like I'm thinking about what I should be doing next. Like, if you're not interested, I'd love to move on. You don't have to get into like some hard sales thing, and just be polite and nice about it.
You're going to be real sorry for not signing this because there's a bidding war going on right now and you want to be part of it.
Don't do that.
Yeah,
Don't do
Unless
that.
there is.
Don't do
I
that.
mean,
Yeah. Well,
I mean, if there is, that's a cool problem to have. And also, but again, even just side note on that, just be honest with everybody involved. And it's totally
for sure.
super normal. If multiple people want the game, like, just say, hey, listen, somebody else is looking at it. Like, how do you do things? Is this cool? Like, and if somebody that's already looking at it, say, hey, somebody else like saw it, that same show or whatever, they're really interested, like, and it's you might get a hard time from some of those people for the rest of your life, as I can attest. But everybody really recognizes, it's a professional industry, right? And if you treat nagging somebody in a professional way, it's not nagging, it's just professional follow-up.
Yeah, I would say two things for that. Also, if you continue to work on the game, chances are the game is not done. So every time you follow up, if you have additional stuff to add, it's really great. Like, if you're just like, hey, pinging you, it can get like, if you have something extra, it's like, oh, I have some more pictures from it went really well at this play test. I'm testing it. I have a digital version now. It's on Tabletop Simulator. In normal times, I'm going to this convention is a really great way to follow up with people. Just adding any, like, I made a little GIF or something, just added value, like added on benefit, any extra thing you can do in there. And this is also why it's just so important to be pitching multiple projects, pitching to multiple publishers, all above board, of course. But like, if you just have the one person and you're waiting on them, it can just be very awful. And there's a million things that will make your game fall off. A lot of these, especially the big publishers, are looking at hundreds.
Even signed ones.
Yeah. They're looking at so many hundreds, if not thousands of games, and they say yes to hundreds of games, and they publish 2 games, right? So there's just, like, that's what you're up against. And yeah, so you just got to keep pushing things out, asking other people, working on the game, working on another game, just anything that will keep you from dwelling on that, because there's a million reasons where it just might fall apart, and we've all been through that. So it's just part of the process of being a designer.
one thing I will add from my own experience is that hearing a no from a publisher should not be the end of your relationship with them. And that is something that I think is really important.
Exactly.
Yes. There are a lot of publishers that I've pitched to that have just outrightly said no to me. And then, I'm like, all right, well then can we stay connected? And they're always like, yeah, absolutely. Figure out some way to connect with them. And then you build that friendship. And maybe your 3rd, 4th, 10th game is going to be right for them. But also you get usually a pretty cool friend out of it too. So.
One of a thing that's still not out yet, thanks COVID, but a huge project I pitched to somebody when they were at one company. They were very interested. It didn't work for their company strategy at the time. They moved to a different company and they hit me up. Hey, you still have that thing? Like, my circumstances have changed. Yep. That can happen within the same publisher, times change, or, if somebody jumps to a different company, somebody in that process might jump to a different company and ask if you have something. So, it's always, no's are just the beginning, and no's are the beginning of that relationship. And taking that no well, oh man, that's probably the best thing you can do, is be told no and just be super chill about it.
Yeah. Or even the silence. Like, again, you do have to be a little careful in those, there's a lot of passive aggressive things that you can say that are just super as like, hey, it's been a little while. Like, there's so many. Read over the email, even pass it to someone else. Just make sure you're 100% positive and upbeat in there, because anything's like, hey, I'm probably going to show this to other people now. Like, there's a lot of little subtle things that can turn people off. So just
I see you promoting that other game. What's going on?
Yeah. I know you're talking to so-and-so about their game.
Exactly.
Oh man, I did give somebody a really hard time because there was something that was supposed to come out and ended up getting killed. So I just got my MG paid out. But it was like a catalog would come out, like, because I'm a retailer, so I'd get the like cool upcoming like stuff we're working on. And it would just be like box, be like maybe a box on some of them. And I'm like, hey, so I got like the fall catalog and like, like F me, I guess. And
I know Jeff had a question that he wanted to ask. So, Jeff, looks like Claire Reeves, you have one too?
Yeah, I'll be next in line. No problem.
Okay.
Yeah, no problem. This is sort of hey everybody, thanks for joining us. This is sort of inspired. I'm acting for the first time as a mentor in the board game mentorship program, and both of my mentees are international, right? So we're dealing with time zones. In fact, I was just chatting with one of them just before we came here, but where she's in Australia. So it just inspired me to ask, and you gave us some tips about using social media, but like if you're, separated by time zones from the people you're trying to network with, or, not in the big urban center like we are, where we have a PAX East, just how do people that just aren't in Seattle or, right next to New York, what are tips for them?
I mean, I come online every night because I work for a Chinese company, right? Like, some of it is just being flexible for where you are in the world, right? And then wanting to connect with, the various community members. I always I run a Facebook group, so that's always an obvious one, but there are many resources on whether it's Facebook or the Twitter sphere, or I would lean heavier on the digital side and then make that friend connection and saying that I have this problem or I have this thing that I want to get out into the world. And again, go back to what I said before about who am I not talking to who I should be, right? I think that's
probably someone that designs games that's close to you, wherever you are. No, I mean, and the thing is, one of the things that we really can leverage super hard as tabletop game designers is that the bottom line is you need people to play your thing. You can't, you cannot do it in a bubble. And so everyone is always looking for more people to play test with. They're always looking for other people to talk design with, because you cannot get around, even if it's a digital tool, but you cannot get around. You need people sitting around playing the thing and doing the thing. And so, designers are always happy to meet somebody new who's hey, I really like your stuff. I'd like to play test it. There's probably one person within a reasonable distance of you, unless you live super in the middle of nowhere. There's people all over the place. There's thousands of designers everywhere.
And post-COVID, there's a Tabletop Simulator where people are playtesting right now. So
I will say one more thing along those lines too, is when you're playtesting, as someone who runs playtesting groups, give more than you take from those groups. Play other people's games. Make sure you are doing that as well, because you do not want to be that designer who shows up, plays your game, and then walks away, because you will get that reputation that you don't want.
I'll say it depends on the context of the particular group and event, but yes, in the case of Game Makers Guild, New Haven, and I'm actually stricter, I think, in New Haven probably. We're looser about everything else, but I'm super about no, we're gonna play other people's stuff. Giving more than you get. I mean, I think that's true for everything in this industry, in life. Give more than you get, and then when you get something, it's good and natural, and people want to help you out.
I also wanted to add that asynchronous forms of communication right now are really great, and kind of adapting some of the more business tools to a more social environment. So Discords, for all the big groups, we have our Discords, but I also have friend Discords. I have multiple designer Slacks that I'm on. So we have just get 2 or 3 people and just one of my Slack groups is based around the Seattle designers, and we kind of came up through there. But you can use any sort of bubble to wrap people around, like people who were at this convention this one year, or you just start inviting, like make your own Discord and start inviting people to it, and just having a couple like I have a Slack with my niece and nephew, and they're like 13, and they have like a memes channel. So just having spaces where like you do the memes and like, what are you doing today? It's just the fact that it's asynchronous makes it a lot easier when you're not local to each other, and you can kind of comment in a slightly less pressure scenario than doing like one-on-one messages with people.
Especially with everyone working and all of that, where you might not be able to comment now. Yeah, I agree.
With all the international playtesting groups, like you could technically be playtesting a game every day if you really wanted to. Like there's Ilhova has his Discord. There's what's his face?
Chris Backy has another really big one.
What's that?
Chris Backy I forget how to pronounce his last name. Chris does. He has a huge international. He's especially internationally.
Vivo has a Discord. Like everyone can, and there is like a playtesting channel within that one. There's a lot of opportunities to tap into the industry through playtesting if that's what you want to do.
Claire Reeves, you had a question.
Thanks. Yes, thank you. It was about connecting with conventions. You said that it was like the go-to and main way to network with people, and I agree with you on a rational level. But from my experience, like with PAX Unplugged, last time I went there, it was like just super crowded, and all designers had booth and were just showcasing their games, and it was just like queuing, and I felt miserable trying to get more than 3 minutes of their time because there were people behind me as well. And the only designer I could talk to was Kurt, because he was just open to try Kurt from Strike and Daggers. Because he was open to try new games to publish them. So it was the only real guy in the industry I could really talk to and have a relation, begin networking with. And that was it, with 3 full days of networking. So I don't know, how do you do when you have thousands of people in these conditions?
So I think there's 2 things to unpack there. One is the way that you approach a convention, right? And if you approach a convention professionally rather than as an attendee, I think that's a big head shift for a lot of people. And that means like trying to find out where events are and going to those events, paying attention to what the industry things are that's happening, not the fan things.
Yeah.
Right. Is there a is this company doing a promotional like bar buyout kind of thing? And it's like kind of like, not officially hard industry, but like kind of industry. And then this couples with this second thing that I think is crucially important, is you don't go to close a deal. You go to like expand the people you know and meet people, and then that naturally segues into something. So like if you go to a convention and you stand passively at your booth, or stand at a table in like the open play area and are like, hey, does somebody want to play my thing? Like that's not going to be successful, or that's going to have much lower rate of success versus like go hang out at somebody's booth and just be like, oh yeah, like, find a time when they're not busy, find a booth that's less busy, just kind of like start talking to people. Don't have this like agenda about it, and just kind of like ingratiate yourself as like, hey, I'm into this. It's interesting. Like find publishers that you like, talk to people, make friends. That's going to really lead to it. And then when you do kind of like sneak into Asmodee parties, don't be there handing out your business card. Be there just kind of hanging out and talking to people and taking it in and meeting people. That's the key, is meeting people, not closing a deal. There are so many people that I've met that I like find out like much later do something that either is going to help me or that I'm going to help them. Right. And that's not the first exchange. It's like, oh, I didn't know you did this. Like, whoops, like we should totally do this thing together.
I've made new friends at a convention the first night at some after hours event. The next day was hanging out with them, and they happened to also be going to a panel that their friend, who is a prominent person in the industry, was speaking at. And then all 3 of us, or a group of gaggle of us, would go back to the booth after the panel, and I would be talking to those people and making friends along the way. It is a very, very like not typical business blah blah blah, right? You just are if you can naturally just be part of the fold, then like the good things will happen as a result of what Matt was saying, is that if you're just there, and then people will give you those opportunities as they're more comfortable with you.
And then
the group you gotta go to the Zayas dance party.
Also true. I throw parties at events.
Sometimes
and then,
sponsor karaoke parties.
You're mentioning you're at the booth and then they go out to dinner. There's a very fine line there. Like, you really got to read the room and say, like, are they trying to do their own thing? Like, you can definitely be that awkward person who makes people uncomfortable for being in the wrong place in the wrong time. But if you're respectful, if you're not too pushy about it, I 100% agree about, like I mentioned, the amoeba theory. You meet a designer, especially if you do like unpubs, other things, like you can meet the people who are super new to it, first time designers, but there's also people I'm in unpub, like there's more experienced designers, and you start talking with them and you can ask, what are you doing later? And like there might be event stuff, or like I know people who just play tests the whole time and just bring groups of people together. It's like, oh, we're going to be over by this column at 9 o'clock at night, play testing games. And then you go over there. It doesn't necessarily have to be social / party stuff. But yeah, just trying to get into the groups with people and kind of reading people's energies, like you had mentioned, for when the booth is quieter. Don't go up there when there's like 50 people crying for attention. Don't go straight for the most popular things. Find some of those off in the corner, people you don't know yet, but they have a booth, they have some people, they have maybe a cool looking game. The people who are looking to make connections as well, they're not in the fold yet, so you connect with them and they can connect you with other people. And also, like, working for booths can be really helpful now because there's industry events, right? For PAX East, for example, first day is always a huge get together with all of the people who worked the booths, and that's just like some of the most amazing networking.
The free exhibitor beers, man. The free exhibitor beers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Free exhibitor beers.
I will say,
I have literally watched, I think, half a dozen friends get jobs.
Yep.
Yeah.
At the PAX exhibitor mixers,
Mm.
like, because everybody's there and they're drinking hard after a long day of doing stuff, and it's all exhibitors. So you're somebody, even if you're just like a random booth volunteer, that's the difference. There's a line, and it's kind of nebulous, but there is a line of like professional, and it's like you don't need to be like career, but like you have an exhibitor badge. Oh man, like, all right, yeah, like whatever, we'll talk about whatever. And then, oh, you got a job, turns out, right? Like,
I will say my favorite part of conventions is that hour before the expo hall opens and the hour right after it closes, where none of the audience is in that expo hall, but all of the exhibitors are there, and you're just going around and meeting people and just talking to them and having fun. I mean, I purposely show up at Gen Con at least a day early every year and show up to the hallway and go up to people and say, do you need help moving things around? Do you need help bringing things in? And just start helping people like set up their booth and stuff, because like then you catch up with your friends and all of that. And to me, that's the most fun part of these conventions.
Set up and tear that day is great.
Finding the hotel, like, there's always the hotel, right? The hangout hotel, like it's always close by. So just go around to stuff.
Some are easier than others.
Yeah, but you'll find some people at some point, like more. You'll see people with a prototype, and just stumbling into people.